Hi, my name. So, what is this all about? This podcast is sort of I guess you could say, a love project that I have been working on for the last almost decade. And when I say working on it, do I mean like actually working on this podcast for the last 9 years? No, not exactly. But what I mean by that is that everything in my life has been working towards this moment so that I can share my experiences with you, um, from what I've learned and that's worked for me. And so this podcast, Spirit and Spice, is all about the woo, as well as learning how to nourish your mind, body, and spirit. And so I am a huge advocate that those three things are connected. I mean, it's been a belief for thousands upon thousands of years, and it's a belief for a reason. Whatever affects our mind will eventually affect our physical body. And so in our world, when we are just so busy, just so constantly stuck in this realm of doing, I think we've forgotten how to just be. And so my hope is that I can teach you how to slow down, how to be more mindful. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited about this journey. And I'm so happy that you're here with me. I hope that you like it too. So, where do I begin? My name is Jenn, and I have not always been a huge health food advocate, or I have not always lived so mindfully. Things happen in life where I think it's like there's signs, and then we just ignore those signs until something just finally just boom. And for me, that boom movement was almost 9 years ago. It's about 8.5 years ago. So prior to this moment in my life, um, you know, I I had two young kids, a young family. I had this new business that I had started. I was a professional photographer. I had weddings booked, like 2 and 3 weddings a weekend. Like, it was insane. I used to keep double stuffed Oreos in my nightstand, and I would just like do like a line of Oreos before bed. So like I was not healthy. I was craving the sugar. I was busy, busy, busy. That like self-sacrificing type person of like giving from an empty cup. So then I hit 30, and this podcast will incorporate probably astrology too, because I do love astrology. So in astrology, between the ages of like 28 and a half and 30, you have a Saturn return. So what that means is that in your natal chart, which I'm getting way too deep, but basically in your natal chart, you have all the planets and everything, and Saturn comes around every 28 and a half, 30 years. And he is the planet of, are you on track? Are you doing what you're supposed to? Are you learning your lessons? I was not learning my lessons. And while I have lots of beliefs about this, I I truly feel like it was just accumulation of things to get my attention. So when I turned 30 in 2016, that year just started off shitty. My cat that was like my first baby. She was my kitty cat through college, through raising young babies, getting married, all of that. She passed away. A month later, my grandfather passed away, and he was like the absolute patriarch of my family. He was one of my favorite people. Then I turned 30. And then, super, super busy, 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 building my business. I was booked like a year in advance. And then September 8th, 2016, my mom calls me in the morning. And I always talk to my mom in the morning. And this particular day, she called me before I'd call her. So typically, like, I would drop off the kids and I'd call mom on the way home. And so she calls me and she's like, Jen. I was like, yeah. And she's like, so what are you doing today? And that particular day, I had a boudoir session and like an hour and a half away from where I lived. And so she's like, can you reschedule? I was like, no, I can't reschedule. And she's like, well, I had this. She's like, I don't know if you'd call it like a vision or a dream. And she's like, but like I was awake, but like I just woke up. And she's like, and when I did, there was blood splattered on a white floor. And she's like, and I just got this like feeling that something bad is going to happen. And she's like, and I don't know what it means. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, gee, Mom, I don't know what it means either. And so now I'm like, oh my God, do I do this boudoir session? And I was like, yeah, I have to. Like this client, like she's already paid a retainer. Like I have like the boutique set up, like the hair and makeup artist booked, like all of these things. And so I'm like, Mom, I can't. And she's like, all right, well, just be careful. And so I was like, okay. And just so happens that night, we were celebrating her birthday. So like we were all the adults all had off in order to celebrate her birthday. But her birthday was like 2 days later. So I was like, all right, yeah, Mom, like I'll be totally fine. And I said, it's probably nothing. And I said, I'll see you later on tonight for your birthday. And so she's like, okay. So go to St. Pete, do the session. The session was amazing, no problems. And then I'm driving home, get home, pick up kids. Like everything went off without a hitch. I think that's the expression. So I get the kids ready. We do the after school stuff. And then we go and we celebrate dinner. And after dinner, my brother and his wife came too, as well as my mom, and then my husband and I and our kids. And our daughter was like, Grandmommy, can I go home with you? Because we were going to go to my brother's house to have cake. And so our daughter was like, Grandmommy, can I ride with you? And my mom was like, yeah, of course. And so our daughter gets in the car with Grandmommy. And then my son was like, Uncle David, can I ride with you? Because my son, especially at this age, was obsessed with my brother. And my brother was like, our son was still in a car seat. So my brother's like, and like his little face was like, please, Uncle David. And his wife, my sister-in-law, was like, yes, of course he can ride with us. And so I started laughing. I was like, okay. So we switched over the car seats if you've ever had kids in car seats, that's a huge pain in the ass, but we did it. And so they go off, and then we were all meeting back at my brother's house, which is like 15, 20 minutes away. They all went one way, and my husband and I were going to swing by our house. And so on the way, and so we went a different route. And we're talking, and, we're just there kind of like laughing. It's like sunset. And we turn this curve. We're on this small 2-lane country road. And as we come around this curve, there's like a line of vehicles stopped. And all of a sudden, I just see this semi-truck that has multiple layers of hay rolls on it. And I notice the top of the hay rolls start to sway. And in that moment, it was one of those things where like time didn't stop, but I was hyper aware of everything. And so as we're driving, the hay rolls start to fall. And it was one of those moments that has replayed in my memory so many times of watching, the first one fall and just like that whole line of them start to shift. And we're driving, the opposite direction. So we're going one way, the semi truck's coming the other way, and the hay rolls are falling. And there was nothing we could do by the time that we were passing the semi truck. One landed directly on the hood of our vehicle, stopped us immediately. If you're from an agricultural community, you know that those hay rolls are super heavy, and especially depending on how wet they were. And since these were just being transported from the fields and everything, like they were still wet and still very heavy. So stopped us immediately, smashed the windshield, and it was absolutely horrific. And so during that incident, my body was wrecked. Luckily, my husband, he was mostly okay. He had whiplash and, some contusions on his knees and like legs and stuff like that. But he's like a very muscular, big guy, and I'm petite, and I was in the passenger. And when I saw the hay roll, I remember watching it until like the very last second, where I was like, holy shit, this is, oh my God, this is how I die. And so I remember I like held onto the bottom of my seat and crunched like this, to try to like steady myself and keep my face away from the oncoming glass that was going to be thrown in my face. And so with all of that, and then when the hay roll fell and shoved us off to the side, pretty much like everything in my spine went like this way. Everything in my body just shoved to the right. And I immediately knew something was wrong with my neck. So, in the state of adrenaline, you're not going to feel things as fast. And so as soon as it was over, my husband's like, "Are you okay?" And so I'm sitting here and I'm self-evaluating, starting from like scanning, doing that like scan. And I didn't lose consciousness. And so I'm like, I think I'm okay. Like my knees hit the dash. So it was like my knee hurt, where the seatbelt singed my hips, like, of course, like that hurt. But I immediately felt, it didn't hurt, but I felt this fullness in my neck. And I was like, that's not good. And so I was like, I think I'm okay, but something is wrong with my neck. And he's like, okay. He's like, just sit back, don't move. And I was like, yeah, I won't. And the way that the hay roll had fallen onto the car, it like crushed the apex pillars in the front a little bit. And so the door didn't want to open. So my big burly husband is, he's like trying to turn in his seat as best as he could. And at this point in time, the truck driver is like coming over, and he's like trying to dig us out of the hay to look inside the car, because the hay roll had like swallowed our car whole. It was so crazy. And so you could just see the relief on the truck driver's face once he realized that like we were alive. And he was trying to jerk open the car door, but you couldn't. And so my husband was able to turn a little bit and lean back to kick the door open. So at that moment, I have no idea the actual extent of the damage, not only to my vehicle, but to myself. And so I'm foolishly thinking like, oh, okay, all right, well, I'm going to have to get the window replaced, but that's what insurance is for, like all of these like silly things. And so needless to say, I go to the hospital, and in the hospital, they do all of these scans. And I just want to go home at this point. I'm so tired. And so I know that, what was it? I think they did the CT scan. I think it was a CT. And then they came back, and the nurse came in, and they started an IV. And I was like, well, that's not good. Because I was hoping that they were going to like see the scans, nothing's wrong, and I can go on my way home. Well, then they start an IV. So I looked at the nurse and I was like, oh, so that good of news, huh? And he's like, the doctor will be in shortly. So I said, okay. I looked over at my husband and I'm like, something's wrong. And he's like, well, you don't know. And I'm like, nah, I know. So then the doctor comes in and he's like, hey, meanwhile, this is an emergency room. And this doctor, oh, I send him blessings all the time. He was this young guy, and I don't think that he was like a regular doctor. I think he was like an on-call doctor in the ER that day from another city. And we live in a small town, and so he comes in, and he's like, hey, so I am not, like, he's like, your CT is not exactly clear. I want to do an MRI. And he's like, unfortunately, our MRI tech has already gone home for the day. So I've called him, and he's on his way back in to set up the MRI, and we're going to MRI your neck. So I was like, okay. So a couple hours go by, and then I get my MRI, and he comes in, and he's like, yeah, he goes, unfortunately, this is what I was suspecting, is that you have a large herniation in your mid-cervical between C5, C6. So I knew like what herniations were, and the disc, bulging, and et cetera, but I didn't know the extent of any of that. So long story short, or at least shorter, because I don't know how to tell a short story. This disc, I end up finding like months later. It was oh my gosh, it was so much chaos. But eventually I found the right doctors, the right people in my life to help guide me. Unfortunately, it took months, and like 6 months, 4 to 6 months. My disc, this disc that they knew from day one, that was this large herniation. It was actually halfway through my spinal cord. So I was a walking, ticking time bomb. And when I finally saw the neurosurgeon, she was like, she's like, all right, well, I'm going to look at your scans. And I was telling her, yeah, like I have face numbness. I have migraines every night. I haven't been able to feel my hands for the last 5 months, et cetera, like all of these symptoms that were just awful. And, and she's looking at me, and she's looking how I'm moving. And, I have great range of motion compared to the normal person. And so she was very skeptical. And then I remember she turned around, she looked at her computer, and she's like typing, scrolling and looking. And then she whipped around in her chair, and she was like, oh my God. She's like, yeah, you need surgery. And I was like, yes. And I was like, this is why I came to you, because I know that you do disc replacements, and that's what I would like. And so she we scheduled the surgery, and she's like, yeah, like I can get you in on Monday. This was like a Thursday or a Friday something. And I was like, oh, well, actually, so this was in the midst of my wedding season. And I said, so from my research, according to my age and, I'm healthy. And I said, I have I think I had 4 or 5 weeks in between two weddings. And I'm like, I saw that, it'll take between 4 to 6 weeks to heal. And so she's looking at me and she's like, yeah, typically. And so I said, okay. And I'm like, well, I have a 5 week window between these two weddings on this date and this date. And I said, so if you are available, I would like to schedule the surgery on this one particular date. It's March 27th. And she's like, you do realize, right, that if you trip and fall and, this disc is further injured, she's like, you will be a quadriplegic. And she's like, you do realize that if you get into another car accident, you do realize that, and, she starts naming all of these things. And I was like, well, wasn't exactly aware, but I said, I've been very lucky for the last however many months, 5 months. And so I'm hoping God will watch over me for it was like a month away, I want to say, for like one more month. And so she just kind of like shook her head at me. And my husband was not happy. But to me, like these two particular weddings that I had coming up, one, they had booked me they were from out of state. They booked me a year in advance. And another was a really special childhood friend that again had booked me like a year in advance. I'm like, I'm not going to do that to them. Like, I can't do them. If I can pop a handful of ibuprofen and make it through, then that's what I'm going to do. So, day of the surgery, I'm laughing and cutting jokes with my husband, who is so beyond worried. But that's how I cope. Like, I have a very morbid sense of humor. If something's uncomfortable, I'm going to crack jokes. And so have the surgery. I wake up, and I remember waking up, I could immediately feel my hands, which was so amazing because at this point, then I hadn't felt them in like 6 months. And however, like I couldn't talk, and I had like this I can't even imitate it anymore. But it was like this real raspy, like smoker's whisper. And I figured my throat was just hoarse from being intubated and all of that. So, go on about my life, and immediately realize that something's not exactly right. Turns out my right vocal cord was paralyzed during surgery, and so that was really tough because not only did it affect my voice, and now I had this like whisper, groggly, like I don't know how to, like, it was as if I was like a 95-year-old woman that had smoked 2 packs of cigarettes my whole entire life and had a whisper of strength left. And so, but not only did it affect my voice, it affected my swallowing. It affected just everything. And so, since it was paralyzed right of the midline, there's still like a gap. And so like aspirating liquids, food, it's constantly choking on like every meal that I had, I would choke. And so it was not a fun healing experience. By the time that second wedding came around, I still did not have a voice, but I was able to hire one of my friends who is an amazing photographer, and she helped me out, and she was my voice. So this started my journey of like, okay, I've taken the medicine, I've done all of these things, I had the surgery, and I'm still not fixed. I can feel my hands. I no longer have like the blinding migraines every day, but there's now a lot of other complications. And the surgeon, when we went back to her, she's like, I'm afraid to touch you. And because I was still in a lot of pain, like in my arms. And I was like, I don't want any more surgery. And so that is when my now best friend's dad, my best friend is my chiropractor. And I met her through all of this. And her dad was my chiropractor and acupuncturist at the time. So he was like, Jen, how do you feel about maybe starting with some nutrition and seeing if that will help you? And I was like, I am so desperate. Like, I will try anything. You tell me what to do. So at that moment, it started my journey of healing myself, of healing not only my body, but, my mind, my soul. I know that sounds so cliche, but it really was like that missing piece. And so I started acupuncture. I started AIP paleo. I did the AIP paleo for 90 days, which is autoimmune protocol paleo. It is extremely intimidating, completely doable, but very intimidating because you cut all of these ingredients out of your life. And it's basically like I cold turkey everything because I am a all in or nothing type person. That's my personality. And so I was like, this is what I'm gonna do. And so where was I going with this? The AIP paleo. So I cut all of these things out of my diet. They had me, oh my gosh, they have you on all of the pain medication, the muscle relaxers, all of that. I hated that stuff. So I immediately stopped all of that. It was probably like the worst detox ever because like I said, I was an Oreo girl. I was not exactly the epitome of health food. I like the idea of health food, and I was always good about not feeding our kids junk, but at the same time, Mama had Oreos in her nightstand, and so it was one of those do as I say, not as I do things. So I immediately stopped the everything. I switched to, healthier alternatives. So the turmeric supplements, CBD supplements, and then I cut out gluten, I cut out dairy, and as well as just everything else that AIP paleo asks you to cut out. And so I would say the first 4 days were the worst. I remember I had a migraine for 4 days straight, and my husband was like, Jen, why are you doing this? Just stop. This is not worth it. And I was like, no, it's gonna be worth it. This has to be worth it. I can't live like this anymore. I was constantly in pain. And while the surgery fixed the disc at C5, C6, I have herniations and bulges above, below, and then my whole lumbar is basically bulged, and so, and my SI joints were messed up. So I had so much pain, and so I'm like, this will help. I will do anything to help because I can no longer keep living like this. That was my rock bottom. I was so depressed. And not only was I depressed because I hurt, but I still didn't have a voice. And that was depressing and awful just in its own right, because I grew up in a family of singers. I grew up singing. My kids were used to me singing them songs for them to go to sleep. Like that was part of our nightly routine. And so it was really like a piece of my identity that died. So do the AIP. Like I said, the first 2 weeks were the roughest, and I stuck it out for 90 days. And then after 90 days, you start implementing, or you start introducing, I should say, foods back into your diet. Always dairy-free, gluten-free, soy-free. Those are, I've noticed for me, the absolute top inflammatories. Processed sugars, like, don't do that. But as far as like adding eggs back in, nuts back in, nightshades back in to see how I react to nightshades. And so it was this whole experiment, this whole journey. And through that, as well as the acupuncture, I ended up getting my voice back. It's not 100%, but I will take it. And I remember I went to my ENT, and I have to go yearly in order for them to scope me and to see if my right vocal cord that's paralyzed, if it's starting to atrophy. And so whenever I went, and the doctor was like, "Oh my goodness, you sound fantastic. What have you been doing?" And I told him, I'm like, "I've been doing acupuncture." And it was like around 3 acupuncture sessions in, I could noticeably hear my voice getting stronger. And it was amazing. It was that spark of hope. And so it was like, okay, this does work. Then that's when I started rabbit holing and deep diving into the world of natural medicines. I had always I always dabbled in herbs and supplements, but heavily dabbled, not really knowing too much about anything. And so, but I do love researching. And once I get on the trail for something, I just want to research it to the very ends. And that is how I started my journey of recognizing how awful our food is in America, and how truly our lifestyle has set us up to fail. And I don't want you to fail. I don't want to fail. I want to thrive in life. I don't want to, just limp through it. And so everything that I've learned over the course of the last 8 years, I want to teach you. The recipes that I've learned to create. Because I think that's like another thing is that, oh, well, I can't eat dairy-free, gluten-free, soy-free because that's too tough. I can't eat a low inflammatory diet because of XYZ. If I, as a person who ate like shit, that closet ate processed snack food, Little Debbie's, like all of that. If like I literally remember like as a teenager hiding fudge rounds. Oh my God, fudge round Swiss roll cakes, like, oh, so good. Awful for you. And so like if I cannot eat that stuff, then you can too. And so, is it hard at first? Yeah, it's a little intimidating. But the great part is that I think that there has been so much advocacy, especially within the last decade. And there's so many more options for dairy-free and gluten-free that it's not so overwhelming anymore. And as more people are learning more about it and we're recognizing like, oh, wow, this is why I have, these symptoms. And when I eat clean per se, I no longer have these symptoms or I can tell that they're diminishing. So I want to teach people that, you know, food doesn't have to taste bad just because it's healthy. I love food. I am a huge foodie, and so are my kids. So my whole family. We're just a group of foodies that we're foodie groupies. And like every meal, it's gotten so bad that like we don't even like going out anymore because the food we cook at home is so much better. It tastes better. We don't feel like shit afterwards. We're not coming home to rush to the bathroom and, all of that stuff. So food is huge to me, and I want to teach you how to cook good food. Not only that, like mindfulness of getting yourself back into the moment, and recognizing everything around you, all the blessings that surround you. Even in the darkest of hours, you can still find a spark of hope. You can still find that little light, that little blessing to be thankful for. And then on top of that, I'm super excited. I have a lineup of amazing people that I can't wait to interview and for you guys to hear their knowledge, and just, bathe in the warmth of all of their yummy, mindful goodness. And yeah, so I hope everyone has an absolutely amazing rest of your day. And I am excited for this new journey. Bye.